Susan Hoyer from Santa Monica. Glad you could join us.
And we're also
Be sure to tell us who you are in the, hold on one second, let me close this. Be sure to tell us who you are in the comments section and change the comments to go to panelists and attendees so that we can see everybody can see it. Now there'll be a Q&A session after the webinar. Whoop. Hold on a second. I got to turn this off here.
I'll put your YouTube on mute. Yeah.
Okay. We're going to start at 10:30 with Pacific time, which is now. So we are, let's get started. Welcome to More Non-Dues Revenue, a semi-monthly Zoominar series sponsored by Chamber Marketing Partners, where we interview Chamber of Commerce leaders and visionaries to share their creative, entrepreneurial strategies for generating non-dues revenue. Be sure to catch the More Non-Dues Revenue Zoominar the first and third Thursdays of the month at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. Links to replays will be emailed to all registrants and will also be available at chambermarketingpartners.com/podcasts. Today's sponsor is Chamber Marketing Partners, generating substantial non-dues revenue for Chambers of Commerce publications without using a turnkey publisher. The model is unique, where the Chamber has complete control, full financial transparency, is better able to monitor member investment in the Chamber, gets a cleaned up and monetized member database, uses local vendors, and can get award-winning publications, all without using a turnkey publisher. Now, might that be of interest to you? Visit chambermarketingpartners.com to learn more and follow us on LinkedIn. So before we begin, in the comments section, please tell us who you are and what organization you are with. And make sure in the comments that you select attendees and panelists. We want everybody to see who you are and where you're with. Post your questions in the Q&A section and we'll answer them following the interview. I'm your host, Ed Burzminski of Chamber Marketing Partners. Now let's get started. Today's guest is Zach Snyder, the Membership Engagement Manager at the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce, a major metro chamber in Michigan. Zach joined the chamber team in 2017 after working in the banking industry for many years on the retail side, helping consumer and business clients with deposit, credit, and lending needs in the Chicago area. He continued in banking, finding his passion helping people in business. Recently, Zach has been helping businesses navigate through the coronavirus in his role at the Grand Rapids Chamber. He continues to grow his family with 2 kids and lives in Grand Rapids. We're excited to have Zach with us on the show today. Welcome, Zach.
Excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Ed. It's a real pleasure.
We're really happy to have you too. So let's jump right in. Zach, the Grand Rapids Chamber is a major metro chamber with different resources than a typical city chamber. Tell us a little bit about your specific chamber, how many members you have, your staff, the major industries in town, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So Grand Rapids Chamber, we serve all of West Michigan. We're the second largest chamber in the state behind the Detroit Metro Chamber. Something that's a little bit different with us versus even Detroit, we don't do any of the economic development. We also don't touch any of the tourism. We have 2 awesome organizations that do that. And we'll just let them be the pros. And then we do kind of all the other chamber stuff, if you will. So we have our business services, which is more of our capacity building, obviously the ribbon cuttings and networking. But then some things that are a little bit different are that we have our advocacy group, which I believe is second to none. We've got 5 lobbyists on staff to help our members anywhere from in their backyard to federally, with many different committees and cohorts, different councils as well, really convening as many people as possible to say what is necessary for business in West Michigan. And one of the newer ones is not just our talent development, but also our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So we've always had a big heart for diversity, equity, inclusion, having summits every year, but now we do a series of diversity, equity, and inclusion seminars, as well as that the summit. And we also have some programs that you can actually where we'll go in-house for our members and do an assessment for their diversity, equity, and inclusion, where they're at, where they could be, and kind of make those action steps for them to move forward in that area.
And we'll
We
talk
have 2,400 members, and they're anywhere from right here in Grand Rapids to, we've got a random one in Tulsa, we've got some in DC because of our lobbying efforts, a couple in Chicago, but we'll take anybody. We'd love to have everybody possible. So we've got businesses anywhere from one person to, the largest employer here, hundreds of thousands of employees.
So it sounds like as a major metro chamber, you have a lot of resources. You have a lot more resources than a regular Main Street Chamber of Commerce does, which is why we actually wanted to have you on board, because you're doing some interesting things. Now, your chamber runs a COVID-19 grant program. Tell us what that grant program is, who benefits, what the chamber does, and more importantly, how does the chamber gets compensated for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So early on in COVID, we identified the need, obviously, for businesses to be supported, and we just started hitting the phones and really calling a lot of our major members, but also philanthropic community. Grand Rapids is actually the 5th most philanthropic city in the country. Amway, you probably have heard of, is one of our largest employers and big philanthropists. You'll notice also a lot of things here in Grand Rapids are named after like the DeVosses and the Van Andels, and because they are so philanthropic. So just really working with them to help fund through our foundation to find money, and we were giving grants away from $5,000 to $10,000 to help with those immediate needs. But then they also connected us with other folks who could invest, and we raised about $1.5 million on our own within a couple of weeks. For businesses. And when you use your foundation, and you also have to make it well known that around 10% of those funds raised and distributed do go back to the chamber as overhead. So we were able to keep more people working during the early pandemic, and take some of the payroll for the people who were working on that grant program so that we could pay that. So that was a big one. We also helped The Right Place, which is our economic development partner, and they had about another $1.5 million that was given by the state of Michigan. And while we didn't necessarily get any revenue from that specifically, the county then, when they had their money that they wanted to divvy up from the CARES Act, which I'll touch more on in a second, they saw that we had done our work, helped somebody else with their grant program, and had approached us to talk more about our capacity to potentially give out about $10 million. And after a number of conversations, turned into $25 million, and then turned into just under $35 million that we gave out in total for our businesses here in West Michigan. So,
who were the targets for the grants?
The grants are anyone. So the first grant, we ended up learning that we tried to do, I think it was 5 to 25 employees, because a lot of those were really missed on PPP and other, like the EIDL. But even understanding some of, I don't want to say our missteps, but just we didn't really foresee that a lot of those businesses, especially minority-owned businesses, were in that 0 to 5 category. And so we expressed that to the county that we need to include those 0 to 5 employee companies, because they had really been left behind with pretty much every other program. And so we had established that we need to help 0 to 25 employee companies. And what we did was we created a point system so that our minority-owned companies were getting extra points for their involvement in their community, being a minority-owned business, woman-owned business, any minority status of business, so that they had a higher likelihood of being approved for the grant money. And then that would be anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 for those companies.
Can you walk us through the process for a lot of the chambers that are participating on the podcast today are smaller chambers. So walk us through the process of how you got this process going, and how another chamber could kind of follow your steps and repeat, maybe on a smaller scale, but gain access to grants. What would they need to do? Who would they need to talk to? And then what process would they need to go through?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I mean, you kind of have to set the stage and show that you have the capacity to do it. So really creating an application, and not necessarily spending the money on the infrastructure until you know that you have the ready to go. But just, again, having that plan in place, maybe if it's, depending on your size of your chamber too, and the amount of money you foresee, I've I mentor someone in a smaller chamber, and they did everything through Excel, which there's no way that would have worked for us. We use something like a project management system like Trello. So just kind of understanding the larger chambers are going to need something a little bit more robust. But going to local community foundations, because a lot of them have certain areas that they really only invest in, let's say it's education, or they really invest in families or hunger or whatever that might be. A lot of them were pivoting because they needed to react to the situation and kind of step outside of their bounds of what they normally will donate to. So that was a big one for us, to just reach out to all those foundations. And again, those other known philanthropists and larger companies. Those larger companies also have their own foundation. So everyone here has probably heard of like Steelcase and Meyer. They have their own separate foundations where they might not necessarily will give extra money to the chamber through those foundations they're giving corporately. But then those things, since it's to help others, are willing to donate. So able to raise that money there.
So interesting. So you approached or you targeted nonprofits or foundations at companies, and you went to them knowing or kind of assuming that they needed to spend and invest somewhere, put their money somewhere, but you approached them with this new opportunity or this new way to divert their funds into something that helps the community through the Chamber of Commerce.
Mm-hmm.
That was very
Especially
smart.
When you think about it, and if you give in one way, it really does invest in other ways. So if you're talking about hunger, for example, we have a lot of people who are out of work, and if they are out of work because they can't make payroll, or they're running a business and they can't pay their employees, this in a way does help fix that gap. If it's childcare, there's people who can't afford childcare because they're not working, and a lot of times children are getting a majority of their meals from school or from daycare. And so this, again, in a roundabout way, does help that situation. And so it was like, where do we normally give? That's great, but this is a little bit more urgent right now. So, and they don't always have the capacity to do the programs themselves. And that's why they invest in people to do those programs. They have the capacity to go now.
Does the chamber, part of this process, does the chamber have to have a foundation set up in order to receive those funds?
It depends on the who's giving the money, because a lot of times foundations will give where the money has to be earmarked in a certain way and it has to go to another foundation. So that's going to be vary from case to case. Or a company that has a foundation will only give it to a nonprofit, for example, or a certain type of nonprofit, because a lot of chambers are like 501c6, but we have a 501c3 through our chamber foundation.
And then, so if the chamber has its foundation, the foundation will pay the chamber 10% for administrative costs, and that is a kind of a sideline non-dues revenue generator for the chamber.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially with us losing so much revenue from events. I mean, we were slated to have 160 events this year. On a normal year, we're around 100. So it was supposed to be a big year in 2020, and going to, I mean, basically nothing, had to make up that revenue in some way. We did have to furlough some folks for a couple of months, but the wonderful thing was, through this grant, we were able to get enough money to bring everybody back.
So as part of this process too, and through COVID and the challenges that you guys faced, you had CEO roundtables that were live, and I understand that you pivoted those CEO roundtables to being online. How did that work? Who are these CEO roundtables for, and how do you monetize it?
Yeah, so CEO Roundtable has been around for a little while here. I would say around 15 to 18 years. And the way that we always do it, and they're CEO management roundtables. So we have a CEO table, CFO table, all the C's, right? But even just marketing. So really, we just try and make a best fit for everybody. And the cool thing is, you're almost making a little mini board, right? And you're bouncing ideas off of similar positioned individuals, who we also try to do. So we have many CEO roundtables, because the CEO of Meyer isn't going to have a whole lot to share with the CEO of, XYZ new company, right? So you try and get everybody with similar like revenues, because they're going to have similar issues that they can talk about. And so without trying to lose any momentum with that program, which is one of our longest running programs, we made it all virtual, because the value is still there. even more so now, because now we're talking about COVID related issues and how are you dealing with that. We've even added to those tables even more so in the past year. So we had about, I think, 12 tables with 8 to 10 people each, and we're, I think, around 20 now with they're full with about 12 to 15 folks. So
How do you charge for that?
a lot of our membership levels get one or more included. So our executive level is $1,500 for the year, but it also includes one CEO roundtable. So every additional one is $150 on top of that. Or if you're our small business level of membership, which is $750 per year, it's our entry level. It's that add-on $150.
And how frequently are the roundtables?
Once a month.
So depending on the level of membership, you get one free, and then you have to pay additionally. So it's an introduction.
Yep.
And then if they see value, then they pay for it.
Yeah.
And who's actually, well, you and I talked offline before, and you were saying there's a particular community, business community that was benefiting from these, particularly the minority community. Can you explain to us why particularly the minority community was benefiting or is benefiting from these, and how?
I think that goes into Elevate a little bit, which we did talk offline about, but another program that we have. And I think what happens is that you have, we'll just call them businesses of majority or white-owned businesses. They almost like innately know that that's a valuable thing to do and almost do it automatically. And on the flip side is if they know someone and they just start talking about business challenges, they're like, well, I've helped, done something like that before. Why don't you and I just kind of, we don't have to call it a mentorship, but they still kind of do a very informal mentorship. And so that's kind of the idea, is that it is almost, it's a give and a take, right? And now that you've got this trusted group of people, it's all, non-disclosure, but, and very safe space. But for whatever reason, or if it's a cultural thing or not, minority-owned businesses don't tend to do that or ask for help or offer to help others as readily. I wouldn't venture a guess as to why, but with, you don't know what you don't know. And with trying to encourage these folks to do this and meeting people where they are and just kind of doing it for them and encouraging them to share, they've benefited greatly. So Elevate is a specific program where we have 8 to 12 minority-owned businesses every year, and they get free business coaching for 2 years. There's a 1-year cohort. And so I guess the non-dues revenue part of this is that this is a foundation that pays us to put this on for these minority-owned companies with that, the revenue of that kind of 10-ish%.
I see.
So we're doing what's right while still getting some of the money for kind of that overhead.
So Elevate is a specific program for minority businesses that's funded through the foundation, and the roundtables are separate, and that's a non-dues revenue generator, for-profit type of thing. How is the roundtable moderated? Who moderates it? How is it handled?
The roundtables themselves are moderated by a chosen person, usually one of the more senior folks on the table, because people will come and go as natural as it will be. And then we just kind of say, hey, the moderator left. Would you like to moderate? And they're kind of responsible for bringing up topics every month. Some of them have really a lot of fun with it too. Like if you miss a meeting, throw $20 in the pot, and then, they do a special Christmas thing with, people who, the money that was made, and they go get drinks or something. So obviously that all works differently now, but they're just chugging along, doing it all virtually. I think there's probably a combination of virtual and in person as well. But an idea as well, we started a new table this year that I'm actually on, and it's a sales referral roundtable. It's kind of similar to a program that we had called Business by Referrals, very similar to probably like a LaTip or BNI or something, without as much pressure, in my opinion. But now we've added the skill building of sales in that. And so that's a whole new table. And then on top of that, to complement it, we added a sales management roundtable. So people who manage salespeople also have a table. So now you've got my wheels turning though, Ed. We could have a minority business owner table specifically. So we do have minorities who are business owners in the tables, but not necessarily as specific as being a minority business owner. So that's a great idea, actually.
So to coach some of the chambers that are on with us today, some of the smaller chambers, if they don't have a business roundtable or a CEO roundtable, tell us quickly how would one go about setting it up, and about how much energy is involved from chamber staff to make that happen?
There's going to be a lot of energy up front because you're going to have to find those champions, if you will, to be probably most likely your facilitator. And one thing that we do to thank them is that their annual fee is covered by us. And so then they would also kind of be in charge of trying to help build the table. So you're going to have to be very targeted with, okay, I want to do a CEO table for 1+ million in revenue. You're going to have to figure out who that is in your membership or out of your membership. So it would be a nice prospecting tool. Like, hey, we're getting this table together of CEOs who are $1 million+. So would you like to be a part of that? Of course, it requires membership, or again, if it's someone that you're targeting, and if they're a higher level member with your organization, maybe you are saying, hey, as a thank you for your investment with us, we'd like to have you, and really putting an email blast out to everybody as well. That was another way we rebuilt our tables last year, was everyone who got a free member or a free registration for CEO Roundtable. We said, hey, you all get a free roundtable. You're not using it. Let's get some people in here. Flooded with people like, oh yeah, we got to do that. And so that was step one of really rebuilding that program. So once it's built out, though, it's really just a check-in once a month or so. Hey, how's everything going? I mean, it's almost like an ambassador program, if you will. I mean, you really probably not even as involved once it's running, because then when your salespeople say, hey, because you use that as a sales tactic, right? You say, hey, something that we have that I think would be great for you when you're making a recommendation is not just for joining the chamber, but join the chamber and do these steps. And one of those would be great to get you or get your salespeople on our CEO roundtables, or let's say our sales roundtable. So then whoever is facilitating that, you say, hey, in our case, Mark, I've got so-and-so who's interested. Could you find him a really good fit? And then you let them, kind of know who's on the table. It's not just like, hey, we're placing you here. We've got a couple of tables that would be good for you. Let's, here's this person around these different ones, and kind of go from there. So you're making them part of the decision as well.
So it sounds like if a chamber wants to set something like that up, there's a lot of initial work, legwork that needs to be done to identify who are the potential candidates, what the revenue level is going to be for those CEO level people that are coming in, whether it's $1 million, whether it's $500,000, depending on your community, and getting that going, getting a moderator, a facilitator going. Initially, it may be chamber CEO or chamber staff that kind of seeds it and gets it going. But afterwards, it's somebody from within the group who becomes the moderator, and it almost kind of starts going on its own, but checking in periodically to see how it's going, how it's progressing, and leveraging the network of those CEOs to go out and find other prospects and candidates to come in to the group, as well as the membership people at the chamber who are using the CEO roundtable as a benefit, and a benefit of membership, depending on what level membership you choose.
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful ones, and probably a good starting point, would be starting with a CEO table that your chamber CEO sits on. Who doesn't want to have once a month, fully dedicated time with the chamber CEO, and targeting people, not necessarily saying like, hey, chamber CEO's got a roundtable, who wants to join it? Everyone's going to say yes, but
Sure.
That big health system or large manufacturer, the personal, invite from the CEO would be very beneficial. And that could be how you also advocate after having these talks, what's going on here in, middle Illinois, right? And really that's how you can get that insight, and then take it a step further to really drive some legislation change if necessary, or if that's in the, capacity of your chamber or not.
Well, and as a small business owner myself, and having been involved in CEO roundtables in the past, private ones, not through the chamber, they were expensive. But I have to tell you, having a room full of the brain horsepower of other CEOs at different levels and from different companies. We had hired gun CEOs, we had owner operator CEOs, and it really is beneficial to be able to talk openly, because when you have issues, you can't talk to a spouse, they freak out. You can't talk to staff necessarily because they're staff, they're paid. Sometimes they're not necessarily going to object or be honest and hold you accountable. That's the most important thing, is being held accountable. So to have a room full of peers who are there to help and solve issues, but from various different backgrounds, I can say from personal experience, was extraordinarily valuable. And it was worth quite a bit of money for me at the time. So people will pay good money if there's good value.
Yeah, I'll say too, I think, there are other CEO table programs in Grand Rapids, but you're going to pay more than your chamber membership plus the 150
Yeah,
to do something like that. And so that's where it's a big value add. We're only asking for an additional 150, and still it's extremely inexpensive when you think about it, right?
oh, that's
And
hugely inexpensive.
yeah,
You're right.
and it's like, it's lonely at the top. Just like you said, you can't talk to your spouse sometimes, you can't talk to your employees. And so that, especially for like a CEO specifically, or any C-suite, that lonely at the top feeling is, I think, where it comes in. But I had a really good rapport with a CEO of a larger restaurant chain here, well, privately owned restaurant chain. And I said, Chris, what are you doing for you? You are always helping everybody else, and you guys, come in here and use our office space every once in a while. But like, what are you doing for you? Why aren't you going to this? Why aren't you going to this? And again, I had really good rapport. I don't encourage you guys to call out your CEO members, but he said, I gotta, I do this group, but other than that, I said, why don't you try our CEO roundtable? We'll find you a good fit, and just be with other people who are in a similar position to you. At the very least, it's good for the soul, right? And a little self-care almost. And then we also do leadership lessons, so we have higher level CEOs who come and talk about their best practices and
Yep.
lessons that they've kind of learned as a program. I said, you got to go to those. And then, who else is going to be there? Other CEOs and C-suite folks. And those are other people you can kind of make some more relationships with.
Sure.
And so he got a lot of satisfaction out of that.
That's
So,
very valuable. Zach, I wanted to jump to another topic, one that is very kind of timely right now that the Chamber is working on. Tell us about the Chamber's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program, who it's for, what are the benefits, and what does the Chamber do, and how is it monetized?
yeah, absolutely. So we have always, again, like I said earlier, had a heart for diversity, equity, and inclusion, but with it growing so much with the state of the country and just issues that we've all been seeing, it's not only the right thing to do from, in my opinion, a personal standpoint, because all people are deserving of everything and valuable, but there's also a business sense to that. Employment is, well, just not with COVID, but just in general, employment was really rough, especially for finding folks, acquisition and retention, and really embracing the fact that we need to hire anybody, regardless of background, race, everything, right? And so, but it goes further than that. It goes into your supplier diversity, your hiring practices. So much, right? Even in training your employees to be more welcoming, and also feeling like they have more of a home where they work. And so a lot of people and companies are hiring these DEI officers, and maybe they had good intentions, right? So something that we had done for quite a few years is at our DEI summit, you could take an assessment and you would get anywhere from a 1 to a 5-star rating. And we'd recommend everyone who got like a 3 or higher, or moved from, let's say, a 2 to a 3, 3 to a 4, so on and so forth. And they'd get a little award and be recognized at our DEI summit. And so we took that idea a little bit further and said, hey, you're a chamber member. Why don't you just you rely on us for other things, right? You rely on us for talent development. You rely on us for advocating for you at our capital and federally and locally. So why can't we just take that a step further and help you even more? You don't necessarily have to hire an expensive consultant or add a whole FTE. And so we do this assessment, and there's 5 different areas that it will assess you on DEI. And then basically after that, we'll prescribe an action plan through either some of our programming or some of our partners' programming. And so that assessment, I'm actually should probably get it pulled up so I know the dollar amounts. It's been a while since I looked at it because I was working on the grant pretty much full time. But we've always also had our Institute for Healing Racism, and that's a 2-day program out of the office where we talk about the issues surrounding racism, how we can all be better. So we took that to another level. We'll do that for your whole, however many people you'd like to do that for in your company. And it looks like I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I think it's not on our website right now. I can give you the ballparks though, because I think we're updating all of our programming for 2021.
But you have somebody that's on staff, right? And again, you're a major metro, so you have the benefit of having somebody on staff who can be a consultant to businesses, to your member businesses, who can actually go out, make this assessment, and help these businesses with their plan and their program. Maybe they don't have that kind of an officer on staff, because most small businesses don't.
Right.
Even most mid-sized businesses don't. I mean, you have to have about 75 to 100 employees before you have an HR director or an HR manager on board. So you're able to provide that kind of a service, and you're monetizing that service, right? You're charging for that?
Yeah, so it's 3,000-ish for non-members, and then members get a discount of 500. And then with some of our higher levels of membership, they get an even deeper discount, or even for free. We've even had it where a member had upgraded from like our $1,500 level of membership to our $25,000 level of membership because they were going to get that for free and some other great benefits along with that, like using our space, for example, where they can use we have a conference center that fits up to 130 people. They can use that unlimited all year with that level of membership. And so for them, they're like, man, bang for the buck, let's do that. So that is a dues revenue, but just to give you an idea of where that conversation might go, because it might be a different kind of conversation than just, hey, give me, $3,000, and then each program is also a different price point. So we'll do our implicit bias training. I believe it's around $1,500 per event per company. We have some other ones, and I apologize, I don't remember off the top of my head, but just different. We have 5 different programs where we'll go in and kind of make that assessment, and then also do the class for you. And if it's something we don't do, like we don't really focus on that supplier diversity, for example, we have someone that we will refer out to.
I was going to ask you about that. So a smaller chamber that, say, for instance, might be looking to have this kind of a program for its members can look to its membership or look within the community for somebody or a company that can provide this kind of diversity training or diversity assessment, and partner with them to provide that to their members. Is there any kind of a certification or any kind of documentation? And is there anything at the city, state, or federal level that those businesses can benefit from having gone through and being, quote, certified through this program?
That might be a little bit over my head. I don't believe so, but I know that there are businesses because we will also help certify businesses as minority-owned, woman-owned, so that they can benefit. So that's kind of a side thing that we've always helped people with. But you're reminding me also that we are actually in the process of basically packaging this so that other chambers can replicate it on their own. So that's actually brand new within the last month or so. So don't tell anybody yet. But
okay, so if I may interject, anybody who's on the webinar who is interested in learning more about this packaged program, just type in "I do" into the chat.
Yeah. I think it can be very turnkey. So if someone is looking to do that, you maybe could do the assessment yourself as a chamber, but then make sure that you have partners who are ready to go, find community people as well. So
great. Okay, well, that sounds like an actually very, very positive program. What's been the feedback so far on that?
It's especially because of COVID and in light of recent events, right, with Black Lives Matter and just the tragedies going around the country. It's been amazing. I mean, the fact that we can still do this type of programming for our members when it would be so hard to do that virtually in-house, that we can be that third party expert. Ken, for example, has certifications that nobody in the Midwest has. He went down to Maryland to do this special training. I couldn't tell you what it is, but I mean, it was so heartwarming to see. If anyone is familiar with some of the things that happen here in Grand Rapids and very similarly around the country, but we had some destruction downtown. And to Ken's credit, the news and media outlets locally were calling Ken specifically. And I mean, I know this of Ken, he's the best. I mean, no surprise to me. And like, we're here with Ken James from the Grand Rapids Chamber talking about, how this impacts everybody, and was so amazing. He's one of the best people I know, honestly, from heart. I mean, how much he cares and how knowledgeable he is, and he doesn't stop. Like, he's learning more. We get feedback based on the programming. We make it better. So, because I think we have to go deeper these days. There are a lot of things we even 2 years ago, it's like, hey, we're checking the box, but now it's like, no, it needs to go deeper. How do we be even better? And that's what he's striving to do. So.
And speaking of going deeper, switching from non-dues revenue to dues revenue, over the last 8 months or so, your chamber refocused its membership directive to targeting specific businesses only. So what drove that decision? Tell us a little bit about what that kind of targeting is, what's the criteria, and how is it working, and what's it doing for retention?
I would say that we actually did probably closer to 2.5, 3 years ago, but then kind of redid it again because of COVID. But really, we identified our target market, who is staying with the chamber based on our data that we already have. And it's usually that executive level, 1,500 or more, that we have the highest retention rate, probably close to 90%, right? And so we also figured out what our average cost to serve a member is that $1,500 or so. It's a little over. And so if we're thinking about working smarter, not harder, who should we target, right? And so we have to figure out who are those $1,500 level and above members or companies, and then go from there. And so, because the other folks, we absolutely want to help them, no doubt about it, but they are more likely to come to us or be referred to us, or we will find them in an organic way through all the events that we attend, either our events or other people's events. So those will happen, and we will absolutely love to take care of them. But really, where do we spend the time acquiring and deepening our relationships is with that target market. So for us, is 20 plus employees within 30 miles of Grand Rapids, and which you won't uncover until you have a meeting, but they have a CEO or C-suite that is involved, that are affected by local issues, and that they care. Because if someone doesn't really care, not that it's just, you're going to be really pulling teeth to get someone to join, and then who knows if they'll stick. But if it's someone like, no, I love this, I want to get involved in this, you'll uncover that in that first meeting or even phone call, that you're a great fit. And then you even will sometimes, I mean, this is kind of an old school sales tactic, but it is right. It's the right thing to do, is say, I don't know if this is the right fit. I mean, I want to figure out if this is the right fit, but if it's not, that's okay. Because we don't burn any bridges, and hey, let's talk next year. Maybe you're going to be in a different place next year, right? And so really focusing on that helped us increase our retention. We actually have really high retention, even considering COVID. And members can see what we've been doing it's that intangible piece, right? How do you sell that intangible? Well, we're doing it right now. And this example will not be lost on anybody. We mobilized, we raised money, we gave out, we also facilitated a grant. And so those businesses will invest at that higher level and will remain at that higher level, or as you grow the relationship, increase to higher levels.
It's interesting because you're in membership development side of the business. Do you pitch or do you ask questions? How do you go about your process?
I personally, and a lot of us probably do this on our team, we used to always bring the folder, right? And you got the folder with everything, and it's on the table. And this is more in an in-person, example. But I stopped the folder until I was ready to go get it. And also with our space, it's like we don't do a lot of off-site meetings. And again, this before COVID. We'd invite people in. Have you seen our office? We're going to be here 3 years. It'll be in March. It is a huge member benefit. So we always say, hey, I'd love to come meet you and see your company, but our office is actually a really big benefit. I'd love to have you in for coffee or a beer. We're Beer City, if you guys didn't know that. And so they come in and see the space and how they can use it. And then I just uncover, coming from banking, we learned the consultative model, and it actually is, I used to work at a major regional bank. And so it was actually tested on, you have to ask those yes or no questions, which are called closed-ended questions, your open-ended questions, which give a little bit more, but then the high gain questions, where it really makes somebody think. And this is one of my favorite quotes from one of my least favorite jobs, but no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And when you ask those questions, it's showing that you care. And so you say, basically sales is, where are you now? Where do you want to be? And how can I get you there, right? How does my product fit into that plan? And you won't know where they want to be unless you ask those high gain and open-ended questions. Obviously the closed-ended ones are good because I need to know what your address is and how many employees you have, but also, it shows that you're going deeper. So what would an ideal situation look like for you as a company in the next 5 years? Where do you want to be?
So really your sales strategy is consultative. It's
Mhm.
not pitching. It's understanding what the business's needs are, what the business person's needs are, and trying to fit what your chamber is able to provide
Mhm.
into solving their need or helping them reach their goal. Otherwise, it may not necessarily be the right fit. And it
Mhm.
sounds like you're pretty open about saying that this may not be the right fit.
I mean, would I rather hard sell someone into membership even at a higher level, or would I rather have a good member and they know that I'm doing right by? I mean, I'll tell people, they're like, what are those other levels? And I go, those are great. I just don't really think those are where you're at right now. And I could sell those to you, but I'd rather you be a member for life.
Sure.
And so, in my opinion, this is best for you right now, unless you really want your name on the wall or something. Then by all means, let's do it. But I wouldn't be doing right by my customer. And that's how it was in banking. And a lot of people probably have a stigma against banking, but it didn't help me sleep at night if I got that extra credit card that somebody didn't really need or that actually saved them money. And that was kind of my chip on my shoulder too in banking, because that's what a lot of other people were doing. And oh, your numbers aren't as high. It's like, yeah, but I get to sleep at night. My customers love me, and I'm happy with that. So I take that here as well.
Well, from a business side and mergers and acquisitions perspective, when a company has recurring revenue stream, that's gold. That's great. So what you're building is a recurring revenue stream rather than just spikes in revenue. Now, which actually is a very sound sales strategy. I wanted to shift to another. It's not necessarily dues or non-dues revenue related, but it's a mindset and it's a business practice that you and I talked about, that your chamber embraced a business process called EOS, or Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is about using the right person, the right seat philosophy. And again, it's not a direct revenue process, but it sounds like this has been something that has re-engineered your chamber. Can you tell us a little bit about what EOS is and how you guys use that at the chamber?
Absolutely. It is, so EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. If anyone has read the book Traction by Gino Wickman, it's based on that. There's also a book called What the Heck is EOS, if you want a real high level understanding of what it is. But it really is, you make a vision traction organizer and you set yourself up so that you know where you are, where you want to go, and then fill in those gaps. Very much like a consultative sales conversation, but you're being real with yourself. And so your executive leadership team, or your ELT, is usually made of 5 to 8 people, depending on the size of your organization. And they have certain roles. One's a visionary, which is usually your CEO. You have someone in sales and marketing, someone in operations, and someone in finance. That's like the core, right? And then you have an integrator, which kind of goes between the visionary and those people, and that's your executive leadership team. But it's kind of just no BS. You're not lying to yourself. You're being ultra accountable. And you kind of, I mean, the biggest thing for us was, you see this Create Great wall behind me. We had to do better for our members because it's the right thing to do. And the chamber was becoming very stagnant after 130 years. And it's really put your money where your mouth is and walk the walk, talk the talk, all of those things, right? We have our core values. That's part of it as well. And we live those and breathe those. They're in my wallet. They're on the wall. But it is the heart of everything that we do. And people need to be the right person in the right seat. And that's called the RPRS. There's lots of acronyms in EOS as well. But then you also, does someone get it, want it, and have the capacity to do it? And that's kind of another right person, right seat, thing as well. So you end up kind of cleaning house a little bit as well. If you're starting something like this, you say, this is what we're going to do. We need to be better for our members. We need to provide better services. We need to, whatever that need is, right? And you say, you're on board? Okay, cool. Now you're RPRS, hopefully. And the first and foremost is that, living the core values. Because if we're not all rowing the boat in the same direction, it's not going to work. And so then you bring on people who are living those values and who understand what your goal is. And so you'll notice at our chamber, a lot of people are around 3 years or less. And that's because that was that time where our CEO said, we got to do it. And that was part of our move, our rebrand, everything. And so, but that where you're kind of, to guys bring it all home here, Ed, is where the money is that since you know where you are and where you want to go, and so you make a 1-year plan, a 3-year, a 5-year, an 8-year plan, and everything goes towards that 8-year plan, and you reassess your 1 and your 3-year every year, and you do these meetings full 1 day out of the office. This is the executive leadership team does these full day out of the office meetings. Where they are adjusting that plan, then you create rocks, and then you roll the rocks down to your employees every quarter. So everyone knows what they have to do to help the organization move forward with these rocks. There's no questions. No questions at all. Then you create your called KPIs, or key,
Performance indicators.
yeah, we call them, it's just our scorecard, right? And so you're looking at leading indicators, not lagging indicators. So how many, for example, on membership, how many meetings do I need to have every week? How many, calls did I make? How much revenue did I bring in, right? So that you're having these very not abrupt, but just matter of fact conversations, and they feel very uncomfortable at first, but hey, Zach, looks like you didn't have enough meetings this week. What's going on? And it's not a gotcha. It's what were your barriers and how can we help you get rid of those barriers? I had a quick story. I had a new employee. So I had been here for about almost 3.5 years, and she had started last year, a year and a half ago in one of her first L10 meetings. So you have your meetings roll down to your individual groups. And she goes, you just let so-and-so talk to you like that? And I go, he was completely right. I didn't hit it, and there was an issue, and we talked about what the issue was, and we're golden, right? So it's very uncomfortable, but it really does. It creates this accountability up and accountability down, and everyone can kind of call each other out. And so that's to say, when we know every quarter what we have to get to the rocks for the organization that roll up to the year-long goal, we create more revenue. The biggest aha I had was early last year. Our CEO just said wow, guys, let's go right to the bottom. We were expecting an 8% loss, and we're budgeting for that, and we were actually up 12%.
Wow.
So that's where the money is, right? So when you're ultra, that's what you're doing, then you have a much stronger grasp of where the money is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that happened every quarter that year. So it's really
so the EOS program it does ultimately turn into more revenue for the organization. Speaking
I'll tell you as well, if you come up with a way, and we haven't even talked about this, a little surprise. So if you work it where you are working like your implementer, so you usually hire an implementer to help you with your EOS journey. And at some point you leave them because you've grown enough to do it. That's the plan. We were referring members to use EOS. So now you've got new programming to talk about EOS and how your members can use EOS. And then if you can work it out with some of the facilitators, you can kind of get a kickback of sorts as well. So now you're saving money off of what you were paying, or just getting a direct kickback. So there is some non-dues revenue in there.
I love it. I love the way the monetization works. I love the way chambers think about affinity programs and that kind of thing. Zach, I want to get people's questions and jump to a question and answer before we go too long. But I want to, Zach Snyder, Membership Engagement Manager for the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce, I want to thank you for your insight and your chamber's initiatives. And I do want to move to the audience questions so that we can get people to ask you theirs. And Judy Hayes has been helping us with questions and facilitating on the back end. Judy, do we have any questions that have been coming up for Zach?
Yes, there was one, Zach, you mentioned something about restaurant promise program, Michigan Restaurant Promise. How does that work?
It's kind of a online, it's just a website that has where you can sign on to it. It's like a pledge. And then the details of the pledge are, that will make sure that we provide a safe environment. We will encourage mandate masks. There's not going to be any, no skirting outside of that. And it was really to make sure that people felt safe going to restaurants, because there were some restaurants, and there are still some today, that are even defying the orders, not really any around here, but just north of here. And so there was kind of a public, sign of good faith that, hey, we are going to be safe and protect you. I can link it in the chat.
And we can add it to the show notes as well.
Oh, okay, great.
One other question. During our pre-show discussion, you talked about notary services, and this might be a good thing for some of the smaller chambers as a way of non-dues revenue.
Yeah, so it just so happens that one of my VPs now, he was my manager at a bank that we worked at together. And so he got the job and brought me in about a month later. So now we're both notaries. And then he actually, we had brought in another person from the same bank, and she was also a notary. So now it's like Grand Rapids Chamber has notary services for members, but we haven't necessarily monetized it. But what we do, we partner with the Opportunity Resource Fund, which is kind of just a micro lending for usually underserved businesses, so usually under 2 years or minority owned. And so they utilize us a lot to notarize their financial documents. And so that leads to membership conversations. So it does come in a revenue way there. But with the idea that kind of got going in our pre-chat was a lot of banks are appointment only or closed. And usually banks are where you can get stuff notarized. And so maybe you could say, depending on how you want to do it, either show up at our office or we'll travel to you, pay per mile plus the stamp, and each additional stamp is another buck, something like that, where you could get some revenue as well. And that kind of goes hand in hand. I don't know if everyone does like certificates of origin. We do certificates of origin, and there's for members, a 20% savings over the 50 normally. So
fantastic. There's some echo here. Okay, that's all we have here. Thank you, Zach. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so Zach, thank you for being here today. Thank you
My
to
pleasure.
Judy Hayes for assisting. Join us on our next More Non-Dues Revenue podcast with our guest Wendy Rich from the Perry County Chamber of Commerce in Indiana on Thursday, January 21st at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. And catch More Non-Dues Revenue on the first and third Thursdays of the month at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. I'm Ed Berzminski for Chamber Marketing Partners, www.chambermarketingpartners.com. And let's get connected on LinkedIn. Thanks, everybody, and onward and upward.
Thank you.